We've hit the 12:02 mark here, so I'm going to go ahead and get rolling. Want to thank everyone for joining. I know 2020 has been a lot to a lot of different people. A lot of people are still going through a lot of stuff. So we started off this meetup, and we've mentioned this before, but in early 2018, and Chet was actually our first speaker. We had, I think, about 6 people there. Now we have about 900 members. So that's in 3 years. And a lot of that's—
I promise that I doubt come back.
Yeah, so not coming back. So it's been a great progress, and we've loved growing this community and continuing to present to you all great speakers in a learning, growing community. So for those of you that don't know, I'm Jay Brown. I work with Smart Data. We're an IT consulting firm based in the Ohio Valley region. We are currently hiring for .NET developers and QAs. If anyone's interested, it is a remote opportunity. So I do want to throw that out. And I want to thank Shanae and Anna for being the best co-orgs ever for this meetup group. And so I'm going to hand it over to Anna to talk a little bit about KEP training and then give an intro to Chet.
Well, thank you, Jay. Okay, this is the time where I tell myself not to get too excited or cry, but Jay kind of, yeah, we started off with only 8 people, and Chet, literally what he's done for our community has like been astronomical. So thank you, Chet. And I own KEP training. I'm very lucky to partner with Chet and to work with Chet and to learn with Chet, as well as, you know, we have consulting in about 10,000 classes we can offer via resell. So I won't talk too much because I'm too excited to hear our speaker. So many of you know Chet. He is first to sign the Agile Manifesto. He is a true legend and a one-of-a-kind and an amazing partner. So without further ado, here is Chet Hendrickson.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for taking a lunch hour out to hear me talk about stuff. I'm going to do something very different than what I often do, which is I have slides. This may be the only time you see me with slides, but I made some slides. So let me see if I can get the slides going here. And we're going to talk a bit about the new Scrum Guide. Every few years, every couple years, the fathers of Scrum, Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland, get together and create a new guide to Scrum, the official handbook of what Scrum is. The thing to remember about this is that the guide has changed. But Scrum hasn't. This is not Scrum point something. Scrum is the same Scrum it's always been. Unlike some processes, it's very consistent over the years. Scrum is Scrum. What happens is that Ken and Jeff and folks that they talk to look around at the world and see how people are using Scrum. And interesting new things that they're using Scrum for and using Scrum in interesting ways, and look at how people are misusing Scrum. And they update the Scrum Guide to try to encourage people to do the good things we see out there with Scrum and to discourage the things that are not quite what they and we have in mind when we say Scrum. And so Scrum has not changed. We're just describing it differently in order for folks to be able to perfect how they do Scrum. Right now, we're in a weird situation where we at Scrum Alliance are still operating under the old Scrum Guide. We're going to be updating our learning objectives probably in January and rolling out new course material that's coordinated with the new Scrum, the new Scrum Guide. But this is really most often just a change in nomenclature and things. So as we look at the new Scrum Guide, one of the important things we notice is that it's gotten smaller. It's gone from about 18 pages down to 13. And this is really because of a couple things. One of them is they've removed a great deal of guidance. There's ideas about how people should use Scrum and things you might do that are kind of ancillary to Scrum, and they've dropped a lot of that stuff. and let people more or less figure it out. And we'll talk a little bit about those as we go along. Another change is really it's become more generic. It's been less focused on software and more allowing and making easier to do things that aren't software. And I think that's good. Both those things are very, very good as far as I'm concerned. Smaller is always better. I'm a great believer that you improve any real Agile process by taking stuff out. And so they've taken stuff out of their description of Scrum, and Scrum has gotten better because of it. And I think that's very, very good. Still the same Scrum, just described in a different sort of way. So the words have just changed is really my point here. And some places where the words have changed are interesting, and maybe some not as interesting. And it's really a question of how we understand these words and whether Ken and Jeff really understand these words. One of the things we see in the new Scrum Guide, come on, change screens, there we go, is that we're going from, we're using self-organizing and self-managing in slightly different ways. Those of you who've taken my classes all know that I usually say self-organizing and self-managing. Ken and Jeff now are moving more towards saying self-managing instead of self-organizing. I don't know that they actually mean anything different by that. I think really what we still mean is that the team takes on work and figures out how to do it. There is no structure within the team of command and control. It is simply folks getting together, working as peers to figure out how to solve a problem. We're calling that self-managing right now. In the great world of semantics and the great world of organizational theory, there's actually a difference between self-organizing and self-managing. I don't think Ken and Jeff really care about that. I believe that they think that self-managing expresses their idea, that the team will manage itself. And that's a kind of a cool idea, I think. Another interesting place where words have changed is the dropping of the term servant leader and instead using a term that they've made up, as far as I can tell, true leader. I find that most folks don't really understand what servant leader means. And there are interesting books in the world of organizational theory around what servant leadership is. Most folks just throw that term around without really knowing the background of it. And so here, I don't think it's really a big change. We're going to call the Scrum Master is no longer going to be a servant leader, but we're going to refer to them as being a true leader. We'll see what that happens. We'll see what that causes people to do differently as you move along. My guess is probably very little. A thing that's going to be interesting to see how we deal with it in the training world is the move from specific roles to now referring to those things as accountabilities. In the training I've always done, I've talked about the roles of Scrum and what they do. I think the main problem and the thing they're trying to deal with is that there really isn't a word in English to describe what they mean. We have people who have things that they are supposed to be doing, things they're supposed to care about, things that they are responsible to other folks for, things they have authority to do. And calling that a role kind of encapsulates all of that. But there's some weird baggage around the term role, I think. Whether a person can have more than one role at a time becomes a concern. And so talking about bundles of accountabilities might be a more interesting way of doing it. I hope that going along with the accountability is the authority and the responsibility. And so it's unfortunate in English, we don't have a word for those three things together because really they have to be so tightly coupled that they're really one idea. And I think that Ken and Jeff will probably struggle over the next couple of Scrum guides to come up with a term that explains what they mean by this. This is an interesting change, I think mostly as an experiment to see what people do differently when we stop saying role and start saying accountabilities. Like most of the changes we're going to see here, and maybe all of the changes we're going to see here, folks who are doing Scrum well will not be impacted by any of this. Scrum hasn't changed. It's just some of the words we're using have changed. And so for you folks out there on the ground, look at the new Scrum Guide and see if that causes you to want to do things differently, because that might mean a place where you have a gap between what you're doing and Ken and Jeff's vision of Scrum. I imagine for lots of you, you won't see very much. And I think that's good. If you feel like you need to make lots of changes because of this, you probably needed to make those changes anyway. And this is a way of getting you to rethink those things. So I think that's one of the motivations of doing this. And I think roles versus accountabilities kind of highlights that. Let me see what my next slide says. Okay. Should I get back to them? There's some new stuff that's new to the Scrum Guide, not new to folks doing Scrum, I don't think, but new to the Scrum Guide. Come on, change screens. New, yes, new. There's something now called a product goal. For those of you who are using Scrum to build products, that product had a goal already. You weren't just building this because you ran out of things to do. You were building this product because it's here to satisfy some need in your organization. Those of you who've taken product owner with me know that when you go off and you start creating your story map, you come up with the values, the things you're trying to achieve for this product. And that's the culmination of those is really exactly what goal is. What are we trying to achieve with this product? Not what the product is supposed to do, but what are we trying to achieve with it? And I think that's something that good organizations are doing anyway. They're thinking about what is it we're trying to achieve and measuring whether we're achieving that and not just whether we're building the product as we outlined it, but are we actually getting the things we wanted because of this? And bringing that and making it a first-class element of Scrum, I think reflects a great deal of what good Scrum teams have been doing anyway, because that's what you do. You think about what it is we're trying to achieve, and you spin up a process to create a product that will get that for you. And that's exactly what product goal is. A way of knowing whether we achieve the goals we set out for. And that's great. I think that's a really wonderful idea. Another new thing, go back here to my lovely slides since I made them. Another new thing, come on, you think I know what button to hit. Is that in addition to just having a new version of our, I don't know what spring means. It's probably supposed to be sprint. Instead of just having one product increment at the end of the sprint, Scrum now supports the idea that we can be producing multiple product increments as we go along. Every time our product has a new feature in it, and the product as a whole meets our definition of done, it is now considered to be a product increment. And depending upon how we're running, if we're moving towards continuous deployment, that product increment goes into the hands of our users. And that's a cool idea. And so here's a place where Scrum is catching up. The definition of Scrum is catching up with what good Scrum teams are doing anyway. We're building a new version of our product, maybe every day, maybe deploying it every day. The one at the end becomes interesting because it feeds into our sprint review process, but we can have multiple along the way. And I think that supports, like I said, what really good Scrum teams are doing anyway. So I think that's really cool. There are some things that have been in Scrum all along that the new Scrum Guide strengthens. Looking at what folks have been doing and adding to that. Ooh, wrong way. Adding to that. And so there are some things here that we've strengthened. One of them, of course, is something I've been hawking on for a good 5 or 6 or 7 years, which is sprint goal. Sprint goal, a slice of the product goal that we are achieving in this sprint. This provides a commitment to the sprint backlog. Our sprint backlog exists now because it is required to deliver the sprint goal. Or perhaps even more correctly, the sprint backlog becomes a way in which we can deliver the sprint goal, and we might be able to find a better way of doing it. And some of the great words in the new Scrum Guide are around the team being able to modify the sprint backlog in order to achieve the sprint goal in a more effective way. This is something I've been talking about for a long time. That one of the great things that comes about because we have a sprint goal is we focus on the goal, and how we get to it, the sprint backlog, is just a way of validating that we can get there. And if we find a better way of doing it, we're allowed to do that. And so this is really a thing that makes us focus on delivering value as opposed to simply following a plan. And those of you who are familiar with the Agile Manifesto know that that's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be adapting to change instead of just following a plan. We should be working with our customers to deliver value instead of just doing the thing we said we were going to do. And I think sprint goal is a way of validating that and bringing that closer to the top in Scrum. I think that's a really good thing. Another place that Ken and Jeff have strengthened is another thing I spend a lot of time doing, which is definition of done, which is about the product increment. We have a product increment every time the product we're building meets the definition of done, and we can do whatever we need to do with that increment. And so strengthening the definition of done to let us know we're building the right product in the right way becomes incredibly important. And I like the fact that the definition of done in Scrum has become more important. An interesting change that supports all of these ideas is in sprint planning. In sprint planning, we used to have these 2 phases, what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. Those have faded away and are no longer spoken of as separate things within the sprint planning meeting. But instead, we're talking about why we're building this product. What goal are we trying to achieve? How does it fit into the idea of our product goal? Why are we building this? What are we going to do to achieve these things? And how are we going to go about doing it? And this has gone from being a phase thing in classics in Scrum 15, 20 years ago. You would see the product owner only be involved with the what, and they may be kicked out of the room when the discussion of how comes up. And now we've reconfigured this and show that the team, the entire Scrum team, should be working together across all 3 of these questions. Why are we doing this? What are we going to do to achieve it? How are we going to do it? And this becomes a conversation that begins really before you get to the sprint planning meeting, and backlog refinement is taking place and honed within sprint planning, and may even be improved within the sprint as we discover new things. The idea that sprint is a shell where nothing changes has been changed to a shell in which we focus on a goal and get it however we can, the best possible way we can. So the goal no longer does not change in the sprint, but how we go about doing it is allowed to change as we learn new things. And learning is always good, and I support that entirely. That's a great idea. It's an incredibly great idea. I think one of the things that will confuse a lot of folks is the removal completely now of the 3 questions from the daily Scrum. A lot of folks doing what we often refer to as dark Scrum spend the entire daily Scrum talking about the 3 questions. What did I do yesterday? What I'm going to do today? Well, what do I need help with? And those have been completely removed. We saw this in the previous Scrum Guide, where they were essentially deprecated in the previous Scrum Guide, and now they're completely gone. I think you're going to find a lot of folks who are sort of adrift because these are no longer there. And they need to be adrift. They should be set adrift because they're not doing what Scrum really has in mind. The daily Scrum is a planning meeting, not a status meeting. And focusing on what we're going to do together to achieve this sprint goal and how that sprint goal fits into the product goal is really the purpose of the daily Scrum, not to generate something to type into Jira, but something to help our team drive forward. And I think that's a good thing. I've been trying to get rid of them for a long time, and I think that's a really good thing. Somehow I've run out of slides. Have I run out of slides? Because I know there's something else I was going to talk about. Whatever it is, whatever it was. Another interesting change, another very interesting change is around changes of words as well, because starting with this Scrum Guide, we no longer have a development team. We have developers. This is a change I tried to bring about several years ago, and I'm glad that Ken and Jeff have caught up with my ideas around this. And there's a couple interesting things, I think, around that change. One of them is the idea that no matter what your title is within the team, whether you're a product owner or a Scrum Master or something else, you can be doing development activities. And so the new Scrum Guide supports this, that a product owner might be doing development activities. A Scrum Master might be doing development activities, and therefore they're a developer on the team in addition to the other role they might have, the other bundle of responsibilities and authorities they have. And I think that's good, because you see places where product owners do analysis or Scrum Masters help with testing or whatever those things are. And so allowing them to do that makes an awful lot of sense. A thing I really like about this, though, is that the Scrum team is intended to be a flat organization, a place where people come together with the knowledge required to build a product, with the skill required to build the product, with the vision required to build some product, and they contribute to that however they can best contribute at any point in time. Having hard boundaries doesn't help doing that. For that team to operate, ooh, I don't have a dog, but I have a cat. Felix, what are you meowing about? Come here. Come here. We have to have a cat break here. Come here. Come here. Come over here. Anyway, what you often see is because we have a group called some kind of team, a development team, traditional organizations immediately put somebody in charge of it. You can't have a team without a team lead. And so since Scrum doesn't support that kind of hierarchy, a way to eliminate it is to get rid of the word team. If you don't have a team, you can't have a team lead. And Scrum doesn't have any leads. Team just has people who work together to accomplish a goal. And I think that's kind of a cool way of dealing with it. We get rid of this word that causes people to do something we don't want in hopes that they don't do that thing anymore. And so what we hope to see is that team leadership becomes situational, that whoever has the best idea today is the leader today. And if somebody else, oh, I got two, somebody else has a better idea tomorrow, then they get to lead tomorrow. And maybe we'll see that flow across the other named roles, the other named bundles of responsibility within Scrum. I'd like to see all of them go away and just have a team. And whoever has a good idea right now, whether it's about product or architecture or implementation detail, they get to lead, no matter what they did yesterday. I think that'd be a cool way to work. That is a cool way to work, it turns out, because I have actually done that. And so I think that's one of the great things that perhaps Scrum is moving in that direction. So maybe we'll see these as the role going away and the responsibilities come into play may mean that the hard names may start to fade. So I think that'd be really great. I think that'd be really great. I think that's all the slides I have. Let's see if that's true or not. Assuming I can get him to move. By George, that's all. That's all I got. That's all I got. So, let's stop that. So, smaller Scrum guide, same Scrum. New words in an attempt to influence how we do things. Removal of some guidance, giving us the ability to look at what we're trying to achieve and figure out how best to achieve it. Whether it's in the sprint planning meeting, where we're focusing on why we're doing stuff, in addition to how and what. In the daily Scrum, we're focusing on why we're doing it, in addition to how and what. And certainly not as a status reporting meeting. Removal of this team, which always bothered me because it was a team within a team, which always confused me. To allow us to be more flat and self-managing. And one way you destroy self-management is you cause somebody to be the manager, the leader. If you want leadership to emerge, you don't anoint someone to be the leader. Best ideas come from that because you don't know where the good idea is going to come from. I think it's a great new Scrum guide. Right now I'm kind of teaching to both of them, letting people know that this is what the tests are going to have for the next few weeks, but this is how you ought to be thinking about things. That's mostly all I got. One of the nice things about short Scrum guide is short session, which means you get to ask a lot of questions. So I'm happy for questions. Are you looking at those, Jay?
Yeah, and I'll try to sort of curate and lead the Q&A here. One question that we had come in, and I think maybe just some clarity here might be what's needed. So you were talking about modifying your sprint backlog to achieve your sprint goal. One of the questions was, how is it different from sprint refinement session? I would look at that as, if you're doing a backlog refinement session, it's sort of outside of your active sprint. But what are you, could you give an example of how you might modify your active sprint to achieve that sprint goal?
Well, it might be that can happen at multiple levels. And so you might come out of the sprint planning meeting with a plan that we're going to use this particular technique to solve some problem. We're going to communicate with these folks via, I don't know, MQ series. And once you get out and start working with them, you discover that MQ is not the right solution to this problem, and you're going to do something else instead, whatever that might be. And so it might just be a technical change on how you go about doing stuff. It might be that we discover that we don't have to do a thing at all, or we do it in a completely different way. We originally were going to build our own credit card processing subsystem, and now we're going to use Apple Pay. And so we might do that instead. It might be that we change how we go about something at a high level customer, at a high level product level kind of thing. We were going to allow people to do these three things to achieve the bigger goal. And we see that they really don't need to do any of that and how we go about building things. And so it's really a question of, if I have a big picture I'm trying to solve, is how can I get to that picture? And I might learn new things about how I can get to it from where I am after I've already started building it. And so really the big idea is that learning doesn't stop at the sprint planning meeting, it can continue on into the sprint. And if we discover something new, we can look at that as a team and decide, do we want to do that instead? Will that get us to our goal better, faster, cheaper than what we originally thought? This can be just decisions made throughout the sprint. We thought we were going to do this. Now we decided we're going to do this other thing. So.
And I would say a lot of that is as you referred to several times. So good Scrum teams are already sort of doing some of these aspects that are being introduced. So it's a good habit to have in a team.
Yes. Always use the best information you have today, as opposed to the best information you had last week.
Yeah, makes sense. So you talked about during the daily Scrum getting rid of the traditional 3 questions. And it's not a status update meeting just to have a status update, which is sometimes what it just seems like nowadays. Could you give an example of sort of what that daily Scrum might sort of sound like now, with aiming towards progress instead of status?
It is not uncommon for folks on a team, as they're moving around getting ready to go into their daily Scrum, to stop by the coffee machine and get some coffee, or whatever the kind of thing like that is. And while you're standing there at the coffee maker, talking to another member of your team about, we need to make sure we get together this afternoon and talk about the thing we're working on together, and make sure, blah, blah, blah. And all those little conversations you have with your teammates as you're all getting organized and going to your daily Scrum. Well, it turns out that was your daily Scrum. That conversation you're having at the water cooler, at the coffee machine, at the whatever, is the daily Scrum, it turns out. And that just standing there saying, yeah, today I worked on ticket 37 and tomorrow I'm going to work on ticket 38. That isn't what anybody cares about. And so you're probably having a daily Scrum and not knowing it. And that's what we meant by daily Scrum, is that conversation you have with your teammates that helps you get through that day. If you're really a team who own a problem collectively, you're having those conversations. That's the daily Scrum, those conversations, not that formal, today I learned to divide by 0 and tomorrow I'm going to do this, whatever that's, nobody cares about that. Nobody cares about that because nobody's listening to you. Do the thing, value, yeah. Right? Do the thing that gives you value.
Yeah. So we had an idea, or based around, I guess, titles and what you spoke about. A question came in. The idea of phasing out a title for each role, is there concern that Scrum Masters may become less of a leader and more of a developer or tester? Or do you see the team sort of stepping in to fill this role? I mean,
I think it's something we don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's something we don't know. I think the move to say true leader from servant leader is an interesting one, and we'll see how that turns out, because I don't know exactly how that's going to, what the intention of that is really. The idea that the Scrum Master is providing leadership to the team by example, as opposed to through some authority, is really, I think, what we're trying to emphasize here, that they are really a true leader of this team, and because they have followers. And I think that's the important thing we're trying to emphasize here, is that the Scrum Master has earned the right to lead in a particular way around how we work together. They are an example of how folks should self-organize, self-manage, work to solve some problem as a collective unit, helping the team do that, as opposed to somebody who has specific authority to tell folks what to do. And I think that's kind of what they meant by true leader, although it's a term that has no real meaning. It is, we'll see what the meaning ends up being, and maybe we'll discover that Scrum Masters will build a definition for what that means, and we'll have something to port out in a couple of years to say, this is what we've been meaning by that. They lead because they have a really good idea and a vision for how we should work, as opposed to they've been given a title to do something.
Yeah. And
We'll see what happens.
It might be that exact word, that word leader, that is probably like maybe what's throwing it off there.
Yeah.
So, and there's a question that I guess a follow-up that came in with that said, full stack developers are also acting as Scrum Masters in a few companies that this person works with in the Bay Area. Is that sort of what the new guide is supporting?
I think that's supporting the idea that a Scrum Master can contribute in the development work. I think we'll probably see a rebound because of that. Because I think Scrum Master is such an important job. The value that good Scrum Mastering brings to teams is so important that it overwhelms what a developer might be doing. And so one of the concerns I have is, since good Scrum Mastering is difficult to see as a specific activity, that it is not valued by organizations. And so you end up being Scrum Master in addition to your other 3 jobs, and Scrum Master becomes a thing that falls aside. And that's a local optimization, and we don't want to do that. We want to optimize the entire team, not just the individual team, not individual worker. And so I think we'll probably see some evolution around this, and we'll see what happens. So that gives me pause, is one of them, because I don't want to reduce the importance of Scrum Master in the eyes of the organization. And so I hope we don't do that.
I haven't exactly encapsulated a question around this yet, but
okay. Well, I probably won't have an answer either. So okay.
That's perfect. Match made in heaven. Thinking about it, the introduction of a product goal. So how does that fall in line with sprint goals and definition of done and some of these other artifacts? I mean, I guess, could you just sort of revisit that product goal and the end purpose around that, and sort of maybe put some more context to it?
I think this is really a support of a very, very important project management activity, project chartering. And so I think that you can look at the product goal as being the top line of the project charter. Why are we here? Why are we doing this? And my experience, and my guess is Ken and Jeff as well, is that I have seen more projects go off the rails because they don't have a clear vision of what it is they're trying to achieve, than pretty much for any other reason. And that is, product goal goes all the way back to project chartering. And so I think that's really a way of subsuming and the whole idea of chartering. And so we're sneaking chartering in the back door, essentially, by saying you have to have a project. Scrum requires us to have a goal for this product we're building, which causes us to have to go through all those activities to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. What are we trying to achieve out of it? It goes back the same thing we saw in the sprint planning, which is why. And so if you start with a goal for this whole product we're building, and you slice that up into sprints, with each sprint having a goal, and then each sprint planning meeting, that goal has to be turned into an actionable set of work, which is why we're doing this. And so product goal, sprint goal, why within the sprint planning meeting, and then here's the work we're doing, supporting all those things back up all the way. And so anything we do within the sprint should be traceable up to the goal for this product. Otherwise, why are we doing it? And I think that gives us the opportunity to think about, well, are we really doing product development, or are we just randomly doing things and we're breaking it up into small chunks of time, and we're calling them sprints, and we're calling this Scrum. And that may not be the right way to do Scrum. I don't think it is, because it breaks the empirical process of Scrum, which is do something, see what happened, decide what to do next. Having this goal gives us context in which we're doing all those things and answering all those questions.
Okay, cool. Let's see. Had another going. So this is going to be a hot topic apparently.
Okay.
Just thinking about titles again, and maybe we don't need to get too hung up on titles, but so a question, or I guess maybe even like a statement and concern. So I have a concern that if a product owner is part of the team and the Scrum Master is a true leader, there will be perception that the product owner who represents the business is reporting to the Scrum Master. So I'm also concerned that if everyone is a developer, management may think they don't need QAs or BAs, even if the product owner is supporting multiple teams. So I think that goes just back to the general question. I mean, some teams do have developers acting as Scrum Master, BA, QA all in one. You know, I think there's just even more confusion around that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that these changes will help that confusion or hurt it or be neutral towards it, because I think that confusion comes from someplace else. I think it's a misunderstanding. I think it's try to apply this traditional project management command and control processes, the Fordist idea that you can take any job and break it up into small enough chunks that the people doing them don't have to know how to do anything besides that one thing, and don't have to understand the bigger picture in which we're working, the bigger context in which we're working. And Scrum says no, that you have to start with the bigger context. There is always this tension around Scrum, from being a self-organizing unit to having somebody responsible, somebody you can blame if things don't go well, the one throat to choke theory. And traditionally, that person in Scrum has been the product owner. But the answer to that question really should highlight that it's the wrong question. That isn't the right question. It's not who we're going to blame when things don't go well. It's how to make sure things do go well. And setting up for failure is one way to make sure you almost always get it. So let's take a step back and look at what we need in order to be successful. We need somebody, at least one person, who understands what we're doing and why we're doing it. Why are we doing this thing? People who can get together and get that work done and build this product. Somebody who can make sure that they're working as effectively as possible, and that anything that's going to slow us down is being taken care of on kind of a separate channel of activity. And that's really what a Scrum team is, right? You have a product owner with a vision for what we're trying to do, bringing the why into the team. You have now what we call developers who have all the skills required to do that. And we have Scrum Master, whose job it is to make sure that those folks don't get bogged down by the stuff that isn't doing that. The things that come floating in the windows, that comes raining down on their heads. And that's kind of what we still have here in Scrum.
So I think that leads into actually this next question a little bit as well. So would you agree that with the idea that the goal of a Scrum Master is to eventually not be needed? Meaning once you've got a team to Agile maturity, empowerment, they can continue to self-manage, and the Scrum Master can move to areas or teams where they are needed more?
Wouldn't that be great? I believe that would be great. I've never seen it happen, but I think it'd be really great. You know, have a team that was so self-actualized that they were able to take care of things as they came up, just as a normal course of events. That would be great. That would be great. Does that mean that we expect the Wildcats to not need a coach next year because they're such good players that we don't need a coach anymore? I don't think that's ever happened anywhere. I think the New England Patriots still need Belichick on the sideline, no matter how well they're playing. And so it's somebody who's looking at the big picture around, is the team working as well as possible, would be really good. Might be very good. And it may be impossible for a team who's focused on building our product to notice these other things getting out of line. It would be great if they could, but maybe they shouldn't have to. And if we can take that work and put it over here and give it to this person whose full-time job is to do that, then we don't have to look up from the work we're doing. We have somebody who's making sure that these things don't happen to us. And so it allows us to focus. And so maybe just the Scrum value of focus requires us to have a Scrum Master, because the development team are focused on this, the developers are focused on developing the product, and the Scrum Master is focused on doing the things so that those folks can do that without being disturbed by other things. And so focus may prevent us from being able to move in that direction. I'll have to rethink that, since I've always been in the work yourself out of a Scrum Master job camp. But focus may mean that's not the right thing, because that's going to split us up and try to look at two different things. Am I doing the work as well as can be done, and all these other things also taking care of themselves? We'll have to think about that.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I guess going back to referring to everyone as developers sort of assumes everyone has similar aptitudes and interests. Is there some?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. I think we just came up with a name to discuss, to cover everybody who isn't the product owner or the Scrum Master, doing this product owner or Scrum Master things at that moment, and doing something for the creation of the product directly. Might have been better just to call them team members. But I happen to thought I wanted to call them developers several years ago, so I had a little bit of attachment to the term. But it might be wrong. It might be Scrum team member, and that might be good enough.
So we'll just wait for the 2023 Scrum Guide changes.
We'll see where it goes. It turns out I might have gotten my way and discovered it was the wrong thing. It won't be the first time.
It's all right. We can adapt. We can change. Move fast. So that's what we got in the backlog of questions here.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody else wants to drop in. Chet, if you want to hang out for a little bit, tell a story you have that you haven't told before.
I'll have to make up a new one.
I have a question, Chet.
Okay.
Going more towards, removing the roles. How will this impact our February CSM class?
I expect by the February CSM class, we'll have the new learning objectives.
Okay.
And the new version of the test, perhaps. Right now, as I'm teaching classes, a class I taught last week, I use both. I said, this is what we're saying right now. In a few weeks, we're going to be calling it this. And the underlying ideas haven't changed. We're just using these different words. And so I think we'll probably be still in that hybrid situation. I expect still by February, no matter what the answer on the test will be, I'll probably be using both words just to provide continuity.
Okay.
Do you think those will reflect on the exam?
That's what's happening right now, is that the first step, I think, based on my understanding of the schedule, is that in January, a new cycle of learning objective refinement starts. Every year in January, they look at the learning objectives. And so since there's a new Scrum Guide, that will mean there'll be changes driven by that. And so that will take some amount of time to come up with the learning objectives and how they evolve based on this. And then once the learning objectives have been agreed to, then there'll be a test that is created based on those learning objectives. And so that's kind of the structure that happens. We look at the learning objectives. We then formulate a test to support the learning objectives while the trainers are formulating a training material to support the learning objectives. And so that all kind of comes together. My guess is that'll be spring sometime. That is a process, that has been happening across all the entry-level certifications. Sometimes it causes us to rethink things markedly. About this time last year, there was a prototype product owner exam. And the result of that was the team working on it had to go back to learning objectives and refine the learning objectives because the test wasn't good. And the problem was not the test, the problem was the learning objectives. And so we got to get the learning objectives right to start with, because otherwise we're just, doing silly stuff. And so the balance between those two is always driven by the learning objectives. The learning objectives have to reflect what we want, and then we can create a test to verify that the learning objectives are being met. And that's a process that takes several weeks, and probably will be a few iterations of doing that, because you're not going to get that exactly right the first time, and we're not going to roll out anything until it's the right thing.
Do you think there's any additional value? This person asked, they're planning on getting their PSPO in January. I mean, should they go ahead and do that, or wait till after the new guide and those exams are updated? I mean,
well, PSPO is Ken's organization, right? The professional, that's scrum.org. And
gotcha.
I don't know their cycle. I know what we do at Scrum Alliance with CSPO. I don't know how Ken's organization deals with that. I assume it's more or less the same. The difference, of course, is since Ken is one of the authors of the Scrum Guide, they probably have a bit of a head start, although we were seeing versions of the new Scrum Guide starting in about July. And so I have 2 or 3 different, incremental versions leading up to the official release one. And so people have been thinking about it, but we didn't start work until the Scrum Guide actually was published, because we didn't know what changes were going to happen. So we didn't start until then. The thing to remember, of course, is Scrum isn't changing. It's just these words are changing. And so I would not let this stuff impact me one way or the other, because Scrum it's the same Scrum.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, it's not like, I know folks who are rushing to get their PMP done before the end of the year, because there's a whole big new version of PMBOK coming out in January, and the test is changing for PMP, and that's a big change. This is not like that. Scrum hasn't changed. Just some words are changing.
Yeah. Okay. I had another question come in here. How do you feel about a lot of XP aspects making their way into Scrum? Example, user stories, story points, etc. Many new to Scrum often believe they are one and the same. I've seen both pros and cons to this, but curious on your thoughts.
We several years ago, Ron Jeffries and I were asked to create a website for Scrum Alliance that was called the Agile, what the heck was it? I don't know. I can't remember the name of it. We eventually went away, but it was suggested that we call out things that were core to Scrum. This is Scrum. And then there were things that we call generally accepted Scrum practice, or GASP. And so a lot of these things fall into this category of GASP. They are generally accepted practice. It doesn't make them right, doesn't make them wrong. It's just a thing a lot of folks do. That does not mean that there's only one GASP to deal with a particular area. And so there's multiple things being done, all of which are being done by somebody reasonably well. And we had, ideas that overlap. Since Scrum is this very lightweight, 13-page thing, it leaves an awful lot up to us. And so you have to have something to put into your product backlog. Scrum doesn't define what that is. It's just an item in the product backlog. And so having something that is the appropriate artifact to use in that situation is actually required. The idea behind user story, of course, was that it was a conversation. It was product owner, development team talking together about what you should do. A lot of folks have misapplied the idea of user story and turned it into a slice of requirement, which it never really was. So you want to, if you use those terms, try to use them correctly. There's other things we can use though. There was something popped in my head as I was saying that I thought was really on point, and I have no idea what it was anymore. I wonder what it was. Oh, estimation. The Scrum Guide now says nothing about estimation, and so you want to think about, do I really need it? Those of you who've trained with me know that I at least want you to try and see what would happen if you don't do it. Can you actually be as successful with it as without it as with it? Is it doing anything for you really? And kind of explore that. We don't care in Scrum how you go about figuring out what you're going to get done. If you're on a voyage of discovery to figuring out what product you're trying to build to solve this problem, estimation may or may not help you with that, and it sometimes hurts. So,
yep. Okay, cool. Well, Chet, we're sitting here at 12:59, so
we built an hour.
We crushed it on timing. So I'll let Anna or Shanae close us out here. If anybody wants to hang around for a few minutes, I'll be around. But other than that, Chet, really appreciate your time. So.
Happy to do it.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll see who we can round up for next time. I have a couple ideas to pass to Anna about some interesting folks. So.
Yeah, real quick, I just want to give a shout out to Chet, and then Shanae will take us out, because one of the reasons we've been so successful is Chet has opened up his Rolodex, and that's how we've had the Cheesy and Brian and just, it's been a great ride. So thank you for doing that for us, Chet.
Happy to do it. Like I said, I got a couple ideas for you. So
I like it.
We love your ideas, Chet. Again, thank everybody for taking your time, your lunch hour to join the Agile City Derby Meetup, and Chet, for all of your dedication to this group and kept training. We really are appreciative. For those of you who are interested, or someone who is interested in furthering their learning and certifications in Scrum, whether it be a certified Scrum Master, certified product owner, or any other trainings that you may be interested in, please take some time to go over to keptraining.com and look at any upcoming classes that are being made available. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. Again, thank you and have a wonderful day. Happy holidays.
bye-bye.
Yay, we just picked up 2020. We did it. Thank you.
See you all next year.
Woo. Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.